So we're going to consider some lessons that we can learn from chapter 5 of Nehemiah here. And one of them is certainly the first is one that we've heard many times throughout this study, not just in Nehemiah, but through Ezra as well. And it's something certainly that Nehemiah is great at, uh, and in setting the standard for God's people. He's a consummate standard setter for God's people. But I think we tend to expect leadership in our community to do this, leadership in our faith community to do this. But we are leaders in our Christian community, in our homes. As men, we should be leaders, and we should be stepping out and setting the standard for God's people. We need to be conscious this week as we interact with others. Even when you think about your current situation and worries and frustrations you may feel, ask yourself, what image of God do I display for those who look to me to see what Christ followers do when the world has no answers? Do they look at me and they see that verse that we read in 2 Timothy 1, verse 7? God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. So that should be the standard. That should be what we're moving forward in. And Nehemiah carries that into the next, which is he's not going to shy away from conflict. He's not going to shy away from conflict, not just because he's a conflictory guy. He's not that guy. But if it's something that is necessitated, if it's something necessary in order to perpetuate God's plans, if he's going to continue God's plans as a result of that conflict, if that's the only way to move God's plans forward, then he's not going to shy away from that. He could ignore the plight of the poor and let the wealthy bankroll the rebuilding when necessary, but he doesn't. He steps out and calls him out for it. He could politely, with no conviction maybe, suggest the nobles take it easy on the interest exacting and maybe not take so many slaves or not take any slaves, but he doesn't even do that. He could condemn all these nobles and run them off even for their failure to uphold God's laws, because that's maybe taking it to that normal degree of conflict that we might think here. But he's not even going to do that. He communicates directly. He commands repentance for God's grace, redirects for God's purposes, and then continues to set the example for God's people by not himself overburdening them. He's not going to crush them. He's not going to stop this entire process where it's at. He leads by example as well. My NIV notes say he's guided by principles of service rather than opportunism. That's what distinguished Nehemiah here in this situation, that he's not driven by the opportunity, and he has opportunities. He's got the same opportunities that these nobles have. He is a noble, right? His governorship, his leadership in this community. If you read in verses 17 and 18, I'm going to read those right now. Furthermore, 150 Jews and other officials ate at my table during this period, as well as those who came to us from the surrounding nations. Each day 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, and some poultry were prepared for me, and every 10 days an abundant supply of wine of all kinds. In spite of all this, I never demanded the food allotted to the governor, because the demands were heavy on these people. So he doesn't just feed the 150 Jews and officials at his table. He feeds those in the nations surrounding the city, all these people that are outside the area that are coming, that need that support. Think back to Joseph again in Egypt, offering that grace to his brothers when they came to him too. He's willing to offer that. What image of God does Nehemiah display for those who don't know God in this situation? That's huge, right? Lastly, Nehemiah wants recognition, but he wants recognition from God. He's not focused on getting recognition from God's people. He's not focused on the people building statues of him, of venerating him, of remembering him for who he is, so that they can pass down the greatness of Nehemiah to further generations. All he cares about, and it says here at the end, he says, and a number of times he says this throughout this entire book, but in verse 19 he says, "Remember me with favor, oh my God, for all I have done for these people. Remember me with favor, oh God." Not people, but God. Remember me with favor. A podcast that I was listening to, that I thought I said this really well. The speaker noted 7 times he says this. in this